Hello, everybody, and pardon my voice, which might occasionally crack due to a lingering but no longer contagious virus. Thank you, Diana, for the introduction. I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. It's pretty remarkable that a community this size has fostered a festival that is able to curate such amazing, beautiful films. This is Diana's second year here. I'm sure she's had a hand in that, but I know you also have a really wonderful board and support group within the community, and I think we should all be really thankful that this exists here and continues to draw so many people from surrounding communities as well as amazing filmmakers from around the country. With that, I would like to ask everybody to introduce themselves, and if you would, just give us a brief summary. By the way, just with a quick show of hands, who was able to see the short films earlier? Fantastic. Okay, that's a great frame of reference for what we'll be talking about today. Yeah, if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves and give us just a brief summary of the film for anybody who missed it, and also tell us how the idea for the film came to you, and if you could add to that, when it did come to you, whether or not you conceived of it as a short or a long film at that time, or was it just amorphous and then the process took over and sort of led you in the direction of a short film versus a longer feature film? You can start off with you, Jim.
Hi, I'm Derrick L. Middleton, and I'm the director of Shape Up, Gay in the Black Barbershop. Shape Up was born of my own experience of going to barbershops throughout my whole life. Particularly though when I realized that I was different, when I realized that I was gay, being in the hyper-masculine space that is the barbershop, it became a difficult space to navigate in terms of you want to feel like you're a part of this really sacred space in your community, but at the same time you feel like an outsider in it. So I really wanted to create dialogue around an issue that a lot of people who don't experience it might never have thought of, and for people who do experience it, maybe to bring about change in that space. And when I initially thought about making the film, I wanted to, I'm an actor as well, so I wanted it to be a narrative feature. And I had been writing for a couple of years, but I'd never told anyone about the idea. Then one day I told my best friend about it, and he immediately launched into a story about him and his partner and an experience that they had in the barbershop when he brought his partner to get a haircut at his barbershop, and his barber, he'd been going to for years, didn't know he was gay until he met his partner, and how that interaction kind of played out. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting story. This film should be a documentary so that I can include the voices of other people as well. And that's kind of how it took shape and shaped up.
Hi, my name is John Dewar. I'm the director of The Beautifully Drowned. This story came to me, it's actually adapted from a short story written by an author by the name of R.W. Gray. So while he was writing his most recent short story collection titled Entropic, he sent me an early draft of where he was at of all the short stories, and he said, hey, is there anything in here you might be interested in adapting into a short film? And at first I wasn't too sure about that. I was much more interested in writing my own films. I wasn't too sure about the process of adapting someone else's work for the screen. But sure enough, I read through the short stories, and immediately when I saw this one titled The Beautifully Drowned, I texted him right away and I said, I have to make The Beautifully Drowned. And he texted me back and he said jokingly, oh, that's great because it's the only one that is unadaptable. And in a lot of ways he was right. Like if you saw the short film this morning and then you went and read the short story, they are very, very different. But kind of that emotional current of the arc of the character of the lead character Lily is still the same, and it is very much this sort of coastal fairy tale story. So growing up in New Brunswick, Canada, where I'm from, it's a very coastal province, and I sort of grew up wandering mysterious beaches of the province. So it really called to me that way, I guess. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Erin Murphy. My film's The Song of the Broad Axe. I didn't really conceive of the idea for the film until I met, I teach video production and documentary production at Colby College in Maine. And one day I met a student who was telling me that she was on the Woodsman team. And I'm not from Maine, I'm not from the Northeast, I'm from North Carolina. And I didn't know what the Woodsman team was. It sounded really interesting, so I just took my camera and went to their practice and took photographs and got to meet the coach and found out that he has an axe collection of 350 axes. And so interviewing him, and I mean, he could have talked for 3 hours about the history of the axe in Maine. It was just so fascinating. And then once I did that interview, my co-director and I just kept meeting people with connections to axes. So it really was a way, I had just moved to Maine, I'd only been there a year, and it was a really good way to get to know the state and to get to know people in the state I wouldn't have otherwise met. So it kind of just slowly evolved over about a three-year period. But yeah.
My name's Rebecca Roy, and I'm the founder of Draft Gratitude. We're a nonprofit draft horse rescue right in Winchester, New Hampshire. And we save draft horses from slaughter by providing them a second chance and a place to call home. So our film was actually a donation by a local film company that learned about the work we were doing and wanted to help us tell our story. So they came out, met us, met the horses. We spent quite a lot of time together to put this together, and I'm still amazed at the number of hours that we shot, that it all came down into this 6 minutes and perfectly tells our story. So I don't have, the answer to the long versus the short. Ours was really about raising awareness for the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, Rebecca being the subject in the film, it's kind of nice to have her on the panel because I'm hoping at some point she can shed some light on what it's like to be the person in the film rather than the person making the film. We typically don't have that on a panel like this, so I'm glad you could be here. So what we didn't get into in our answers, although I enjoyed all of them, is this question of long versus short. And I remember when I was making my first documentary and I was working with this incredible mentor, and I said, how do you know how long the film should be? And his answer was, the film will be as long as it wants to be, which is about as gray as an answer you can get. But in some ways, it does, the story will point you in the right direction. Other times, you're operating under a functional budget where you know the film has to be a certain number of minutes, or you know that you want it to be in the short category, or you want it to fit in a short slot on television. So I am curious for all of you filmmakers, at what point did it become a short film? And how did you reconcile that with what you were planning to do, either narratively from a documentary standpoint? We can start with you, Erin.
Okay. I thought it was going to be 10 minutes long, so I actually thought it was going to be shorter than it was, so my film's 30 minutes long. And that was kind of a hard length to deal with. And I definitely wanted it under 30 minutes. Just a lot of film festivals have the cutoff for a short being 30 minutes. So I kind of struggled with getting it that length. But yeah, originally I wanted to do something much shorter, but we just kept meeting people, so it kind of expanded, and then we had to figure out a way to get them all in there. But yeah, we started off knowing that it was a short, and we stuck with it on the longer side of the short.
Even from the, I guess, adapting it from the writing process, I had always gone in with the intention of The Beautifully Drowned being a short. I knew it was going to be a long short, and at the 24 minutes that is generally kind of long for a short film. But yeah, I did know going in that it was gonna be long, and the screenplay itself was about 14 pages. But I remember assuring everyone, the producers, the cast, the crew, everybody, I was like, even though it's only 14 pages long, this is going to be a really long film. I'm kind of stylistically, as a director, I'm really drawn to long takes, kind of things, films that are slower paced. So I guess the first cut of this was about 33 minutes long, and I had some takes where it was, basically just Ariana, who plays Lily, just kind of staring out into the ocean for 3-4 minutes at a time. When I showed it to the producers, they were like, "You're gonna have to cut this down." I was like, "I'm not cutting a goddamn thing." Anyways, sure enough, they convinced me, and I'm glad they did, because I feel, even watching it today, because I try not to watch it too often, so if I get a chance to come to a festival, it's sort of like seeing it kind of sort of not really for the first time. But I am still pleased that I felt that cutting it down from that original runtime, it still sort of has that slower pace that I appreciate, and still tells the same story I wanted to.
For me, budget was a big factor in the length of the film. Also, because it's my directorial debut, I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew. So I thought keeping it short and concise would be smart. And and I think that I like the challenge of a short film because, like you said, I had so much footage, and the process of actually editing it down, throughout that process, I really found my storyline, and that was I think something that I will definitely take with me when I expand the film into a longer one.
Yeah, and actually I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that. We chatted last evening about his future plans for what to do with this project, and I'd like you to share that with us.
Yeah, I want to add women into the mix as well. The experiences of queer women that go to barbershops to get their haircuts, because there are a lot of women who enter that space, and they have a very unique experience that is quite different from that of males. And also mothers who bring their sons to get haircuts. They have a really specific experience that I've always watched, right? Like when moms would drop their kids off to get a haircut, there's a reason why they're not waiting. Like the moms, they'll find anything to do. They'll drop their sons off, go get their nails done, go get lunch, and it's because they don't feel comfortable sitting in that space where, like the guy says in the film, Clay says, anything's on the table, any subject matter. There are a lot of misogynistic comments and, men ogling women sometimes, and it's like no mom wants to sit in there, So I want their perspective as well. So
I also wanted to direct this question actually to Erin. In some ways, your film is kind of a really good example of how a short film can be used. I think that one of the ways in which a short film can be somewhat liberating for a filmmaker is that you're really not bound to the prototypical idea of it has to have this kind of narrative arc. It has to have a beginning, middle, and an end with a climax at a specific point. You can really drill down on a specific subject. You can drill down on a specific character and really get to know them and what makes them unique and interesting. And one of the things I thought was so well done about your film is, although I did find myself wondering if at any point you felt like you had to wear protective gear when you were at the axe throwing.
I know.
The first time you went to that, I thought, wow. But you really were able, a lot of these people, I would imagine this may be the first time somebody, was shooting a scene with them, they were on film, and the subjects all seemed really comfortable talking about what they were passionate about. And I was wondering if you felt like you had, what your strategy was or how you approached them to create such a comfortable atmosphere for them to talk about something on film like this.
Yeah, I love interviewing people who are passionate about something, and they're just so open. Like every single one of those subjects is an educator. Like, they want to share what they know. So I think that kind of makes them really easy interview subjects, because all of them teach in one way or the other. All of them want to engage with the public. So none of them are like, oh, I'm just here in my corner of the world working, I don't want to tell anybody about it. Like, all of them are really interested in talking about axes, and talking about axes for a really long time. So I didn't really have any problems getting people to open up. I mean, from the initial phone calls, just explaining what we're doing, and they were so excited that this film was happening that they were perfectly willing to, like, let us into their homes and just follow them for a couple days. So that part was really great, because they were easy subjects.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't have to wear protective clothing, but that one scene where she's hitting the axe in between her feet with the sneakers it was traumatic.
Yeah, that was actually something. And I want to actually pitch this question to the whole panel. Filmmaking can be an arduous process. Do we have any people who are considering making a film in the audience? No? Okay. This question will just be fascinating. I can recall vividly moments making the films that I was a part of where I thought, wow, this is a challenge that I did not anticipate, or this was kind of a moment where I thought, if I don't push through now, it's not going to happen. And I'm wondering if, I look at all of your films, which are complicated in their own individual ways. Were there moments where, when you were making the film, that you thought, okay, this is something that I wasn't expecting, and how did you approach that situation?
For ours, the filmmaking was all very new to me. So I just went in there knowing that I had good people, professional people guiding me, and went with it. I mean, I didn't have anything to compare it to. I didn't go in with any expectations, because I had nothing to compare it to. So for me, I was happy to have great people to work with that were, guiding me and educating me, and I felt very comfortable with.
That's good. It's always good when the filmmaker can insulate the subject from the chaos that is happening. I will just say that right now. That's in fact a special gift that filmmakers have. But here, John, you look like you've got a couple stories that are competing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of what one to tell. There's so many. I mean, I don't know. There's the stories of, like, our equipment failing us. We shot at the scenes that were in the village. We shot at the King's Landing historical settlement, and it's an actual historical settlement that you can go visit if you're ever in New Brunswick. Let me know. And there's it's entirely of the time, and there's very little power there. So getting generators there, making sure people were able to stay warm, and then. When we were shooting in St. Martin's, we were kind of on this, I wanted the beach that we found that we were shooting on to be desolate and make sure there were you couldn't see any houses or people walking around or stairs. So, we're kind of bringing down equipment, all this heavy equipment down these very rickety, tiny set of stairs, and, basically shooting on the edge of the earth. There's all that, which is difficult, but in particular, I guess, this one for me, the hardest thing, or the point where I wondered if I was going to be able to make this film, was in casting the lead actress. I basically almost spent a year casting and trying to find someone to play Lily, and it was kind of getting to the point where I was almost considering delaying the film. I don't know if I would have to delay it another half a year or up to a year to try to find who this person would be. And then lucky enough, we had another round of open auditions, and Ariana Marquis is her name, showed up kind of out of the blue. I think she just saw the posting that we had on Twitter or something. And, she came in and auditioned, and it was just this sort of great moment of, okay, that's exactly what I've been looking for the past year or so. So I guess that was those things where if I couldn't find the lead actress, I mean, the whole film would have fallen apart. So I was ready to possibly delay it or just put it on the shelf until we found her, or she found us, however that works. But, yeah.
That's a good story.
For me, I think one of the most frustrating or difficult parts was moving the props, because shooting in the barber shop was one thing, but the interviews, the barber chair, we had to rent that, and we had to pick it up. So we had to rent a really big truck, and then we had to drive all the way out to Long Island and pick it up, and that thing weighed a ton. And the truck that they put it on had a lift and everything, but when we got to the actual building that we were going to shoot in, it was a walk up. So we had to carry the barber chair up flights of stairs, and I mean, you probably would think it was heavy, but it's even heavier than you think it is. And that was a challenge where at one point we were like, can we get the chair up there? And if we can't, how are we gonna work around it? But luckily we got it up. So that was probably a really big challenge. And the other thing was, the barber shop that we used is my own barber shop. So I think it was scary for me to make the decision to really go for it and be open with my barber, and at the same time the other barbers in the shop. And I was thinking, what is the dynamic going to be after the film is done, because I still got to go get my hair cut, so that was something that was kind of daunting, but it worked out in the end.
Erin, did you have any?
Yeah, I mean, the shooting, like I said, was really enjoyable, and I didn't have any moments of crisis then, but the editing process was really difficult.
I was hoping you would bring
Yeah.
that up, because I feel like that's something that it catches you by surprise each time how strenuous that can be. But go ahead.
I mean, so we figured out what we wanted the film to be, but we didn't really know what it was going to look like. And it wasn't until editing where I realized, okay, all these different stories, they kind of go together, but they don't really, and I don't know how to link them. And so my co-director and I went out for a couple glasses of wine one night to kind of figure this out. And she came with an idea of incorporating the Walt Whitman poem into it. So that part came in probably the last 3 months of editing, and that really, I think, tied it all together. So until then, I was just thinking, well, maybe these are just shorts and we just publish them online, and they're kind of standalone pieces, but not really. So at that I had a pretty rough 2 weeks of what are we gonna do? But yeah, editing's always, I think, you have a lot of crisis moments when you're editing. At least I do. At least it feels like it's gonna fall apart multiple times before you can see it.
And I think that's true. Documentary filmmaking in particular, the film is really made in the editing room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, just quickly, how much footage were all of you guys working with?
Oh, hours. I mean, I don't even know. It was just,
You don't even know.
It was so much footage. And put it this way, I have enough footage to make probably 2 more films of the same length. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't, because I want to, like I said, incorporate a different story. But yeah, it's a lot of footage.
But
I don't know exactly in terms of hours and minutes how much footage we had, but I know when I was converting and editing the files, we had 2 terabytes worth of footage. So whatever you can put into minutes or hours in terms of 2 terabytes was where we were at.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't actually have a ton of footage. I think we probably had about 65 hours, which is not a lot. So,
yeah.
I think ours was somewhere between 8 to 10 hours and got put down into 6 minutes.
Yeah, I think 65 hours is a good,
Yeah.
when you have to watch all of it,
That's true,
sometimes
yeah.
twice.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah. Question for John. The film is just, I'm sure you all would agree, visually so exquisite. And you kind of you had a hand in every piece of this process. Even though you weren't the DP, I know you had a strong feeling about how it would look and feel. You adapted the screenplay. You also directed the project. The film was so well acted, I thought, and I'm glad you brought up Ariana, because she just was outstanding. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it is like to direct actors And then in particular, I mean, this film is not a realistic film. It has this fairy tale quality. It doesn't take place today. How did you approach that? How were you able to communicate the feel that you were after with this project?
So I guess the first point in terms of working with the actors and also coming up with the visuals and whatnot, I had a really great learning experience on this film, and I've told people it might sound a little silly or pretentious, but I found that this was the film where I really found my voice as a director, whereas on the previous projects I was kind of still trying to figure out exactly what that was, and I feel like this is the film where I finally discovered that. And for me, the big part of the process in terms of working with the actors was developing a process that was responsive to them and what they're doing. In my previous projects, I would very diligently storyboard, and when we'd go to shoot, I would be quite rigid in maintaining those storyboards, and we follow exactly this plan, and the actors have to work within the space that I'm giving them. And I found, when I was working with Erin and Jesse, I really changed that process up, and I saw what we'd run through the scene, and I would see what they were doing, and then the cinematographer, Matt Rogers, and I would then decide what the camera should be doing. So it became first about working with the actors, seeing what they're bringing to the space, what are they bringing to the scene, and trying to come up with visuals that highlight that. So kind of very performance-based, very responsive to again the actors. And it was very difficult for me because, again, as I mentioned, I was kind of quite rigid in my visuals and storyboarding and whatnot. And you kind of take a chance because you do all this planning ahead of time, and then you get to the set that day and ready to shoot, and you're kind of abandoning almost everything that you had planned. But I find when I watch the film now, it's those scenes where I was most embracing that are the ones that I feel are most effective and the ones that I kind of enjoy watching the most. So I think, when I continue directing going forward, that's something I want to maintain. Again, a very responsive process. Like, a philosophy I have now is that you don't know what the scene is going to look like until you're in that room with the actors, with the cinematographer, with the gaffers, sure, maybe even the sound people too, and see what they bring to the scene, and then you'll know what your shot is supposed to be, and following through on that. So that's my main takeaway, I guess, from this film, and I feel like that was something that helped the performances quite a bit. I guess in terms of the fairy tale aesthetic, which you had mentioned, a big part of that, at least I think anyways, in terms of how it comes across for the audience, was about finding the right locations, finding the right art director and the right props to bring in, using the proper costumes. We actually had someone who was making our costumes, so Cora, the kind of Grim Reaper like character, like those costumes were all made. That wasn't something that we went out and found, but it was very important to me that we weren't green screening everything. We were finding these actual locations, and although that ended up being quite expensive to bring a cast and crew to these places, kind of finding these unique vast landscapes and shooting there, I felt was something that would bring that feel over to the film. And that required a lot of, I basically spent an entire summer location scouting around the province, around New Brunswick, trying to find these locations, and not just saying, hey, this looks great, this will work, but actually spending time there and getting a feel for this place, and does that feel match kind of the aesthetic or mood or atmosphere of the film I'm trying to create. So that was something that was really important to me, and I think that was a part of getting that fairy tale feeling across.
I do have a quick follow-up question to something you said. I'm sure everybody is curious as well. You mentioned that there's a couple scenes when you're watching the film now that you feel fulfill that idea, and I'm just wondering if you can tell us what those scenes are in the film.
Yeah, sure. There's There's two or three in particular. The first one of which, and this was a scene that even in the writing process I was finding very difficult, but it's that scene where kind of the first time we see what their relationship is like behind closed doors, a scene where she has the mobile, he comes in and pushes her up against the wall. I had a very different idea of how I was going to film that going in, and there were going to be a lot of different cuts and a lot of different angles. And I found once we got in there and we started working through it, I saw what Ariana and Jesse were doing with the scene, and I was like, I can't cut. That'll ruin this scene. I was like, we have to do this in kind of that one take that it's in. And I found when I was watching her, I felt that experience and just thought, why would I ever cut away from the way she's reacting to this right now? This is, in life when those things are happening, you don't get those cuts, you don't get those moments of escape. You're kind of contained within this. And it's a really tough scene. It's, something that the actors, we all had, difficulty with just because of the subject matter. But I feel that was, when I watch it, I feel like was the most honest way to tell it. The other one is the one where she starts dragging him out to sea after she, spoiler alert, pushes him off the cliff. So I remember Ariana came up and looked at me and she said, how do you want me to drag him? How am I going to get him out to the ocean? And I looked at her and I was like, how would you do it? And like her jaw just dropped, and I won't swear, but let's just say she was like, heck yeah. And she's just that kind of actress that she loved, like almost that no direction was kind of the perfect direction she needed. So when she's dragging him in that scene, she was literally left on her own to drag his body out to sea. And with the cinematographer, I just said, like, let it run, don't cut it. Like, I'll do it in jump cuts in the edit. And I was really pleased with the way that turned out, because it's actually her struggling to carry his body. Like, he's not giving her anything. No one's, helping her outside of the camera or anything like that. It's all her. And I was a bit worried about what might happen to her back. But I feel like when you watch it, you see and feel that struggle, that she's going with getting his body out to sea. So I think of how much fun we were having, and I know it's, when other people watch it, I hope you're not laughing anyways, but I'm always kind of having a laugh to myself, because when, we were in between takes and whatnot, we were all laughing and having a pretty good time about how much yoga she was going to have to do to fix her spine after that. So. Yeah.
I'm glad it ended well for her.
Yeah, she's great. She's great.
And actually, this is a great opportunity to ask the other filmmakers. I'm always curious, especially after having watched your films, what are the moments when you, Erin and Derrick, are watching the film today on the big screen where you say, yeah, I hit the nail on the head in this scene or at this moment? Erin, do you have a favorite moment in your...
Yeah, I think it's the scene or the section with Mike, the home builder, the guy that's hewing his own logs. That shoot was just an amazing shoot to go on, and his wife was incredible. And we sat there for about an hour afterwards and just had tea with them and talked. And then, it started snowing during the shoot, and it just looked beautiful on camera. But he was just such an amazing person, and I was really happy with the way I edited that scene and just all of that. I think it's definitely my favorite moment in there. Just all kind of came together.
Yeah, I think that something you did well with that scene and throughout is documentary filmmaking. You want, well, for some documentary films, not for all. Clearly, there's ones where the narrator has a really strong presence, but where you want the camera to feel like it's disappearing for the viewer and for the subject. And I think that you accomplished that.
Oh, thank you.
And how about for you? What's your...
In my film, I think one of my most proud moments is between Wade Davis, the NFL player, and his barber. Being able to get them on camera together, that, I mean, every time I watch it, I'm like, yeah, that's really, really, that really, it's a special moment, you know? And I thought about it at first. We were thinking maybe we would film them separately because everybody else we interviewed one at a time. We could interview him, then interview his barber. But watching his barber kind of talk about what happened, and then you see him like honestly squirming in the seat while his barber, you get the sense of kind of like how it really feels because he's kind of reliving it again, hearing it, and I'm like, yeah, I think that was really authentic, and yeah, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, and I also I want to say I think it takes a certain amount of bravery when you're making a film. You feel somewhat obligated. You establish certain conventions, like you said. There weren't other scenes where the hairdresser was standing next to the subject, and sometimes you have to be willing to take a chance and say it's worth it to break with the convention because this moment is so important, and it takes a certain amount of courage. But I also wanted to ask you, we were talking a little bit about the cinematography. Your film has a very specific look. When I think about the film visually, not the content is fantastic, obviously, but I'm just wondering how you arrived at this idea of what the film should look like, and then how you accomplished that, because it definitely works for what you're trying to tell with the story.
Thank you. I had a very clear vision of what I wanted the interviews to look like. I automatically knew that I wanted them to be in a barber chair. And I also wanted to really pay homage to the sacredness of the Black barbershop and what that means within our community. So I wanted them to feel regal, and I wanted them to feel proud. So we set up the chair with the frame behind them, and to kind of make them feel powerful and really beautiful at the same time. And that was really important to me, but it also has a sort of a vintage look to it that I wanted it to have as well, to tie in with the footage from the beginning when you see the black and white photos of the barbershop. So that was all really deliberate, and my co-producer, he did a fantastic job helping to build that set. And he helped to bring my vision to life, and yeah, so that was really all him.
What did you shoot that on? What kind of camera?
That was, I believe, a Canon. I always forget this, but yeah, a Canon. It will come to me.
Okay.
Come back to me.
And Rebecca, do you have a moment when you watch your film where you say, okay, this is...
When we're down in the field with one of the Belgians, and his name's Jimmy, and I'm petting his face, and we're talking about that they'll go to a safe family or they'll stay until they pass, and just there's no way, obviously, because the words weren't in there at that time, but just even the reaction from the horse at that time was just heartwarming to me.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. So we haven't talked a lot about fundraising, but for budding filmmakers, which all of you are, except, well, I mean, you have Erin, I don't know, are you currently making another project?
Yeah, I'm working on a new project right now.
Oh, okay.
So.
Actually, well, let's cut to that. Tell us a little bit about the new project you're talking about.
Okay. This is interesting because I don't yet know if it's going to be a feature or a short.
Hey, that ties in perfectly with our theme. Maybe we can help her decide.
I just talked to two of my producers. I have 3 producers, but 2 of them are trying to discourage me from doing a feature. And my automatic response is, no, you can't say that. I'm going to make a feature. But the fundraising comes into it it's just so much more expensive to make a feature documentary. But the project, it's about a high school art collective in Portland, Maine. And it's a group of students, about half of them are immigrants to the United States, and the other half are native Mainers. And so they kind of blend art with activism. And they're all different types of artists in there. They're fashion designers, musicians, spoken word artists. And I've been hanging out with these kids or I should say young people, for about 3 months filming them. And they're just amazing. They have so much energy, and they're just The name of the organization is called Kesha Wazo, and it's Swahili for Tomorrow's Ideas. And their goal is to make the world a better place for young people. And so I've kind of envisioned it as a collaborative documentary. So the subjects are very much part of the story-making process. They have things to say about what I film and what I don't film, and then react on camera to what it's like, to their experience of being filmed. So I'm trying to grapple with that too, and write grants for fundraising, and just it's been all-consuming.
So is most of your funds, they are grants?
Yeah, well, right now it's all through me, so I haven't gotten any grants yet.
Okay.
But I'm trying. It's a hard process to get funding, and it's hard because I'm still thinking of the idea. And so when you're writing grants, they want to see a very concrete idea of what it's going to be, and they want to see footage. So not only do I have to know what the story is, but I have to edit part of it before I even. It's hard.
Yeah, and also typically those grant proposals require that you at least offer a suggestion of where the film might end up or how it's going to be seen.
Yeah.
So is the answer to that question film festivals, or are you looking for a broadcast audience for that one?
Right now it's film festivals. And my goal is, because all the students are in Maine, and I really want the first festival to take place in Maine. So either the Maine International Film Festival or Camden, because I want them all to go. So that's really important to me. But yeah, that's as far as I've gotten for thinking about the post. But I think it'll be important for them to to set up screenings with the film, like in high schools, so they can kind of get their message out there and show other young people, you can figure out who you are, you can make art, you can be an artist and an activist. So I think that's definitely part of the end of the film.
Okay.
So.
John, what's up for you?
I just received, in October, I received funding for a next short film from Arts New Brunswick for...
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
That's got to feel pretty good.
The title right now is The Wonderful Future. I feel like it's a bit too close to The Beautifully Drowned, so I might end up changing it. We'll see, right? These things are a work in progress. I'm currently aiming to possibly try to shoot that in October, but it's kind of contingent upon a couple other things, getting the right cinematographer, and there's some certain actors I want to work with, and they're from away, so making sure I can get them in. But it's this kind of post-apocalypse world where there's only, we think anyways, there's only. I feel like I applied for this. I have the funding for this, and I don't have an elevator pitch yet for it. I'm so sorry.
You can try it out on us right now.
Yeah, no pressure.
This is a very gentle audience.
Yeah. So it's a post-apocalyptic world where the two characters both believe that they are sterile or incapable of having children. And then all of a sudden this third person shows up out of nowhere. They didn't know anyone else existed, and he has legend of this fertility plant, that humans can consume and will allow them to be sterile or fertile again. So it kind of comes down between this really awkward triangle between the three of them, because there's the two guys and there's the one woman left, and it's about them trying to kind of take ownership over her body and sort of mansplaining to her what should happen with her body or how they should repopulate the world. And she's kind of someone who has no interest in having children and doesn't believe that humanity is worth saving. So there's a lot of kind of tension between the three of them. And yeah, how's that for an elevator pitch? Yeah.
And I know you told us that you're looking at lengthening the project. Can you tell us a little bit about the process for raising money for that, and if you have a timeline for it?
I'm actually in the process of applying for a grant, so I'm hoping that will come through, because the first time around I funded my short out of my own pocket and I went broke doing that. But it was a deliberate choice, because when you're funding, you can raise money, crowdsourcing the money. And, I think that's a beautiful way. But I always say, it was a deliberate choice for me to invest in myself because I felt like being a first-time director, I wanted to have a body of work to show for before I ask anybody to, give me any money or invest any money. And also I wanted to make the film now. I didn't want to wait about a year or however long it might take. So, but I think that paid off, and I'm hoping that I can parlay that into getting this grant to make it a longer film, because I'm definitely not going to be able to fund that on my own.
I wanted to save some time at the end for audience questions, because I'm sure. Yes, we have one.
This is to Derrick. There's one scene, the one scene in your film, which was very powerful to me, was you getting a haircut. From several different vantage points. One is for you to go inside. We saw you inside and your internal struggle. I thought that was very poignant. The other was the barber. I thought he was such a neat guy. At first he's just going right. And then he really warms up and he gives that opinion about words. And I thought that was so powerful. So putting that together along with the content of the words, we struggle with those words. Do we say F word? Do we say faggot? Do we say N word? Do we say nigger? Addressing that issue. And I thought that was encapsulated the whole film for me. Can you give me your impression of that scene?
Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, I think that is a really powerful moment as well, and very, very much unexpected. I did not expect that, but he is a very, my barber is a very dynamic man. He, like you pointed out, sometimes he's very quiet, but when he starts talking, he's really brilliant, actually, the way his mind works and the way that he can communicate with people. But for so long, I didn't really have real conversations with him because I was afraid to open up about who I was. So a lot of our interactions were like, I knew all of his stuff, all of his business, he would talk to me, and sometimes I've had barbers in the past assume that I have a girlfriend, so they'll be like, oh, so how's your girlfriend? I'm like, oh, she's fine. And like, so we never got to connect. So when you're on camera, that moment was one of the first moments actually that I felt like we really genuinely connected, like he knew what I was thinking or how I was really feeling, and I felt vulnerable. And even when I asked him about eliminating the usage of the F word, I think his response was just very honest, and that made for it added to the authenticity of the film, because, the N word is used a lot in the barbershop and within the Black community, and it's not, it's a very controversial word, whether we should use it, whether it's okay, and for him to say flat out, he uses that word, and, it's not, to be honest, my grandmother uses that word, and she's an older Black woman from the South, and she uses that word, amongst family members, and it's like something that she grew up with, and we will say, Grandma, why do you keep saying that word? And to her, it's like, it doesn't hold the same weight the way that she is using it in that context. But then again, that word still means, it's still a very heavy word, and it's still like, so for him to draw the correlation between the two words and eliminating the usage, it's so much about the context, right? Because in the barbershop, I found that a lot of the guys that were using the F word they would say that they weren't using it to offend anybody because they automatically were assuming that all the men in the barbershop were straight, right? So they're not even, because the gay guys, a lot of us, I know myself, I was hiding. So they're assuming this is a gentleman's only club, all the guys in here are straight. They're throwing this word around thinking that they're not offending anybody. So for him to draw the correlation, I think it was a really powerful moment as well, and I appreciate that you were able to recognize that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me the enlightening moment there, I don't know which person said it, about the N or the F word is usually prelude to violence, and that was really powerful for me,
Right.
that danger, like.
Right. The gentleman that said that, Rashad, he's worked for GLAAD, these organizations that advocate on behalf of the LGBTQ community, and like he said, he worked in television and worked on getting that word removed, like people fired for using it on the air. And so I think that he was the perfect person to close out the film and really like bring it home and put it into perspective. And he really does. Like how I was saying just now, my grandmother, how she uses the word. But then if I tell her grandma, that word, I know that you don't mean any harm when you say it, or you think that it's not harmful, but you have to understand, or I'm sure she understands, that was the last word that a lot of Black people heard before they were killed, before they were lynched. That word is a very heavy word.
Right. And for me, it shifted from the cognitive of understanding everything you just said to that emotional, visceral reaction of that to think of it in a different perspective is really powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, in the way in the back.
What was the reason you brought to the barbershop for the cameras?
You said the what?
The reason for the cameras that you brought to the barbershop to keep it candid?
Oh, good question. So that was a challenge because I had to get permission. My barber is actually also the owner of the shop. So I had to get permission from him, obviously, to shoot in his shop. And I had to give him enough information for him to agree to it, but I also did not want to tell him what was going to happen. So I basically told him, I want to shoot a documentary in the shop. And I said, I can't disclose everything about it to you, but I'll tell you what, I will let you see it. And if you're not happy with it, if you're not comfortable with it, I won't use it. And we drew up a contract and we agreed to it. And, I was like, trust that I will not, because you have to keep in mind too, this is a business for him. Anybody who's gonna let you into their business, they wanna make sure that what you put out there is not gonna be disparaging to their business. So I just had to assure him that whatever the outcome was, if he was not okay with it, I wouldn't use it. And luckily he was okay with it, because I would have hated to have to scrap everything, but that was how I worked around it.
Yes.
John, it sounds like it was fairly seamless for you to be able to get the rights to that story. It isn't always. But was his story collection under contract with the publisher? Did you have to acquire, the cinema rights, or?
No, I'm actually pretty lucky in that R.W. Gray, the writer, I actually, Frictive Pictures, the film production company I co-own, he's also an owner of it, and with Matt Rogers, who was a cinematographer on the film. So getting the rights was never an issue. Like, we did have a formal contract that we wrote up and whatnot, but he's a pretty nice guy. I didn't have to pay him anything for it. I jokingly told him that any money that the film makes, I'll give towards him, but the film's not going to make any money. He knew that, yeah. Yeah, but I know that is a struggle for a lot of filmmakers who want to adapt something. So I feel really lucky that isn't something that we had to go through at all. I wish I knew more about that actual process, but for us it was, again, because and know him, work with him was pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question for Rebecca. You said your film started as a marketing thing. Has that actually helped you?
It has, actually. It's definitely raised awareness. We have a Facebook page, it's on our website. And we also recently won a Doris Day Animal Foundation grant, and that was one of the items that we submitted with our application. So it's definitely raising awareness for sure.
Right, and it's kind of a follow-up a little bit to Erin. John, not so much because it's yours is fairy tale-like, but Erin and Derrick, both of yours are centered on issues or activities. Do you see them being used to promote, tolerance, or promote the Woodsman Club at Colby or anything?
I think among a certain group of people in Maine, it's made a lot of traction and people are really interested in it. There's a pretty good tradition in Maine of making stuff with your hands, so I think people really like it because of that. So once we get done with the film festival circuit, we've been in talks with the local PBS station of getting to air there, so I'm hoping a lot more people can see the film. Yeah.
For myself, what I want to do is down in the Village, which is like a historically LGBTQ community in New York City. Years ago, when I was in high school, I noticed that they had these like stickers in the shop windows that looked kind of like rainbow flags. And, I just thought that they were like, because it's like a gay community, that they were just putting the pride flag in the window. But I found out that these stickers were to symbolize that this shop was welcoming to the LGBTQ clientele. But to go even further, I found out that historically that those stickers meant that if you were ever in danger, if you were ever being attacked on the street, you could run into this space for refuge. But I noticed that none of these stickers were ever in urban communities, in Harlem where I lived, or, all of the Black communities I ever visited, I've never seen these stickers before. So what I wanted to do is create like a sticker, but specifically to target minority communities where you wouldn't normally see a sticker like this. And I was thinking about documenting that process as well, because I think it'll be really interesting. I know I mentioned it to my barber, and he said that he had heard about the pride stickers in the past. And he said years ago he brought it to the attention of the other barbers in the shop, like, I'm thinking about putting this in the window. And he said they were all against it because they didn't want the clientele outside to think that it was a gay barber shop. So I think hearing that response from him, I was like, maybe I should document this, because it's not going to be as easy as just saying, hey, you want to put this in your window to promote tolerance. It's going to be a kind of an education of sorts, to really get them to come around.
So following up on that, what has been the impact on Denny Rose at this point?
He has been a lot more vocal. I think that what I found out from the film is that he was already tolerant in his mind. But I think me bringing this up to him let him it brought it to his attention that even though he may have felt tolerance within himself, not expressing it, I didn't know it. Like I didn't know that I was safe or how safe I was, or that he was an ally of sorts. So I think now he is more aware of the space and of people that may. I think he's more aware of guys like myself that are clients he's had for years that are quiet, because it's very obvious if you really pay attention. The barbershop is a very loud place. All of the guys are talking, whether they're talking about the game that's on TV. There's always one or two of us that are always there, quiet. And I think that he's aware of that now. And just that kind of awareness in and of itself is a step forward, in my opinion.
But has he lost or gained customers?
Yes.
Oh, definitely gained customers, because Harlem in particular now it's always had a really big, gay community. I mean, gay people are in everybody's community, but particularly Harlem, there are a lot of gay-owned businesses that are popping up now. So I think it's only really in his benefit to kind of be out there as a shop that's tolerant to gay clientele, because a lot of gay customers are looking for, where can I go to get a haircut where I'm not going to be discriminated against? I know a lot of friends of mine prefer to get their hair cut only by women because they feel more comfortable going to get their hair cut by women. So knowing that his shop exists, will only benefit him.
One last question? Yes.
I just, Warsaw. I was wondering how you got, what had you're the founder of the, yes, how did that come about?
I grew up on a small farm in Hinsdale, and we had draft horses growing up, so I suspect that's probably where it started. And then as an adult, I had an aged Belgian mare. I had her for the last 6 years of her life, and then when she had to be euthanized, that really got my wheels turning of wanting to be able to do this, to actually have the rescue. And so I'd work on it, and then life would happen, and I'd put it aside, and then I'd work on it, and go back and forth. And then 3 years ago, I really got serious about it and put the board together and got our nonprofit status, and we just got rolling. And now we're 3 years later, and we've saved 27 draft horses from slaughter. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I think this was just been fantastic and enlightening, and I appreciate all of you being here.
And thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.